What is up, WWB Universe? It's me, the varsity athlete, Jeremy Baudet, coming to you with a quick take, midweek update. And of course, I have to talk about Revolution that went on this past weekend. It was a huge show. It was billed as a huge show. It's over now. We've had a couple of days to chew on it. And so this week, I have my 5 takeaways to take away from AEW Revolution 2025. All right, gang, Revolution 2025 is in the books. There were some ups, there were some downs, there was some good, there was some bad. Overall, I'd say I'd probably give the show a B, which might be a little bit controversial. I think a lot of people that really like the show, and I did really like the show, would have given it a much higher rating. So sit tight, listen up, just hear me out, listen to my 5 takeaways, and that might explain to you why I gave it maybe a B or a B minus, which might be a little low for some people. But before I get into that, please give us some love, like, comment, share, and subscribe if you like wrestling content that isn't completely maddeningly insane, and you also are very interested in local indie wrestling. Please give us a follow, check us out. I don't think you're going to be disappointed. We got a lot more great content coming up in the months to come, and some very, very cool projects that we're working on behind the scenes that we cannot wait to share with you guys once they get set in stone. Okay, so Revolution was this past Sunday night. It was a pay-per-view. You could buy it on Prime, right? I believe this was the first pay-per-view you could actually get on Prime, which was kind of novel, kind of cool. Hopefully expanded the fan base. I haven't seen what the pay-per-view buys yet have been, but I would assume, given the expanded access, before you had to get it through, I think, Bleacher Report. So now your ability to get it through Prime I would expect maybe not significantly, but would increase the number of buys given the level of accessibility that everybody had to it. So these are my 5 big takeaways from Revolution. What do we want to walk away with given the state of professional wrestling today, and specifically AEW as a product, both behind the scenes and on screen? So here's my first takeaway. My first takeaway is AEW is not dead. If you live your life like me and you spend a huge chunk of your time in the internet wrestling community, you might get the impression that AEW is basically on death's door, that it's on life support, that the only thing keeping it afloat is, Tony Khan's dad and his ability to sink money into this inevitably failing business. The haters out there are pretty strong against AEW, and there's a lot of winds blowing in the wrong direction. But I have to say, the quality of the product that we saw on screen was extremely high. Many of the performances were exceptional, and we'll get into some of them in a minute. And ticket sales were very strong. Viewership, while AEW certainly, I think, would like to do better and did better 5 years ago when they started, if you look at AEW in comparison to their competition, which is their time slot on their day across other cable channels, they consistently perform very well. Turner and the networks constantly report that they're happy with the numbers. HBO says that AEW's, the simulcast that they're doing with Collision and Dynamite consistently perform on par with what they expect and are some of their best performing live sports events on a weekly basis. I mean, we have to take them at their word. It's their business. At a certain point, we just have to trust them. Given all of those things and the fact that ticket sales for the pay-per-views are very strong, Revolution was very strong, over 10,000, very enthusiastic, very good crowd. They sold it out. There weren't reports of like these crazy 2-for-1 specials and things. Yeah, Grand Slam didn't go the way that we'd hoped, right? We were hoping we'd sell 52,000 tickets. But we still sold, 13,000, 15,000 tickets? I mean, that's a very good showing. You rewind the clock back 10 to 15 years, and WWE would be thrilled with a performance like that at a pay-per-view, equivalent of Revolution today. So AEW is absolutely not dead at all. All right, number 2. One thing that was especially noticeable for me at this particular show as compared to other ones in the past is the level of celebrity involvement. We saw those two guys, and forgive me, I can't remember their names off the top of my head, that were in the Righteous Gemstones. So a lot of sort of cross-promotional work going on with HBO. They came out and actually did something in the pre-show, which was kind of interesting and fun. We saw Leslie Jones out in the crowd very enthusiastically. I don't know if this was a work or a shoot, but she was out there screaming at Swerve Strickland and Ricochet during that match. Ken Jeong was shown on screen, throwing a lot of hate MJF's way early on in the show. So is this a work? Is this a shoot? I don't know. I guess the primary takeaway, the primary message I want to share is it doesn't really matter. I mean, the fact that this wasn't Brad Pitt or some sort of A-list level celebrity, Timothy Chalamet or something like that, the fact that it wasn't one of those guys really doesn't make a big deal. Yeah, these were maybe B, maybe C level celebrities. But the fact that they were there, the fact that they were enthusiastically participating represents a step forward, right? In the 80s, WWE really made their breakthrough in a lot of the crossover celebrity work that they did at the time. This is something that AEW seems to be doing more of today, and hopefully it will lead to more success for the company. Okay, number 3. Man, the story was really spotty. Some matches were backed up with a lot of reinforcement, right? I'm thinking of, obviously, the Toni Storm match, right, with Mariah May. Like, this was supposed to be the great grand finale, the end, lots of story to back it up. MJF. It didn't go back a long ways, but there was a high level of intensity. There was a lot of back and forth. The product touched upon the story consistently throughout especially the most recent weeks. There was a significant run-up. Same thing with Cope. Things lagged a little bit a few weeks ago, and then they started that little sideline where Cope was taking out members of the stable one by one so that Moxley would be stuck there. And that made things kind of interesting. So there were some really good storylines to back up what we saw at Revolution. And then in other areas, they fell really short. I mean, the tag match with what was it, the Hurt Business, or the Hurt Syndicate, sorry, and the stuff with the Outrunners. Yeah, they've done a little bit of work here or there, but a lot of watching and staring, not a lot of actual stuff to raise the stakes and make it interesting. The Monet match, at Grand Slam, Momo came out, and there was some looking, and there's been a little bit of work the last couple of weeks, but not a lot of backup, really relying on the momentum that they built from Monet's time over in Japan, which is now, 2+ years ago now, something like that. Not a lot to back it up there. In addition, the Brody King and Okada match, just no story to back it up, no real justification. It looks like they're just packing the card. So 50-50 on that one. My 4th takeaway, just like the story was spotty, the performance was very spotty. I think that the big winners for the night, outside of Toni Storm and Mariah May, who obviously stole the show, and I will not hear any argument otherwise. If anybody shows up to our recording this week and tries to make the argument that Toni Storm and Mariah May did not steal that show, I'm going to spit in their face. Okay, so I'm calling you out, Matt. And Dan, you better come up with a really damn good reason, because I don't think you can make any justifiable argument that Toni Storm and Mariah May didn't completely steal the show, Macho Man Randy Savage and Steamboat, WrestleMania 3 style. They just came in and totally burned the house down. But the big winners for the night outside of them would be MJF and Hangman Adam Page. Why? Because they came out first. They came out first. They knew they probably weren't going to get color. They didn't have some insane stipulation, falls count anywhere, cage match type thing working for them. And there weren't any titles on the line. So they came out first, and they put on a banger of a match. I mean, it was a really, really good match. Interesting, lots of story, high-risk moves, lots of great selling and great story, back and forth, communicating with the crowd. Very, very, very solid match. And they got in, they got out, and they don't have to get compared to anybody else. Everybody else was getting compared to them. And the matches that went above and beyond with great story and great performance, those were placed above them. And the ones that didn't have story that was as good as them and didn't even perform as well, even though they had decent stipulations and title belts on the line, they fell below them and they were considered crappy. So obviously the Toni Storm, the MJF match, and the Omega match with Fletcher in the steel cage were great performances. But once again, the tag belts, I mean, the Outrunners are good. I think they could do some really fun stuff with them, but it's really hard when you're dealing with the Hurt Syndicate holding the belts, that you have to have them on TV all the time in order to justify the belts. The main event was just it was the perfect example of what I have been talking about, which is you have to have a great end. And when Christian came out and did his little cash in and it didn't work, now, Christian and the whole Money in the Bank, whatever equivalent, their contract, totally screwed over, totally buried. The title is still buried. Cope gets buried. Everybody wanted Moxley to lose the belt or at least bring the belt back out so we can see it again, so it's not hiding in the shadows. This was a time when I think Toni really didn't read the crowd well. It was time to snap the rubber band and move on, and we still aren't doing it. And I really feel like we're going to start getting Jericho-level go-away heat, not just for Moxley, but for the title as well. I think we're getting some fan fatigue on that front. And that's related to my fifth takeaway and my final takeaway, which is, guys, the ending is key. This AEW has really developed a reputation, and I think this is because they're still charging $50 a pay-per-view for packing the card. There were 3 pre-show matches. There were, I think, 10 matches on the card, bringing it to 13 total. AEW, I think, really feels like, because this isn't a premium live event, because you actually are paying your hard-earned money for it, they feel like they have to earn that money. And one of the ways that they do that is they jam the card full of matches that, for at least half of them, could be very solid main events at just about any pay-per-view you would see on WWE programming. But they still don't know how to get the ending right. And the fact that they botched the main event pulled down the rating for the card. I said I'd give it like a B minus. Honestly, that was an A show. I mean, the tag matches, the Monet match, which was executed very well, but the story wasn't great. Okada King, okay, a well-executed match, but again, the story really wasn't there. Like, you could easily justify this being an A match, 4 to 4.5 stars. But man, that ending, that really, really left a bad taste in your mouth. And honestly, I would give that match a D. I don't think it's an F. Like, nobody got seriously injured, and it didn't completely upset the apple cart, but it was a D. And when you're as you work your way through the card, each match, it's kind of the opposite of what you would expect. Like, in most situations, you'd be like, okay, as we go along, each match becomes less and less significant in the grand scheme of things because you have more product to compare it to. So if you do a lot of good stuff, but that's true up until the very end. And when you get towards the end of the card, that last match has such a disproportionate amount of impact on the overall score. So honestly, probably a B minus before the main event, A, maybe even an A plus. I mean, I'm willing to forgive some of the mistakes that were made in the tag matches. I mean, even like the Ricochet and Swerve match, which I really haven't talked about at all. It had a lot of drama going on with King Nana. It had the robe. It had the back and forth. It had a lot of involvement of the crowd and seeing Leslie Jones out there screaming bloody murder. There was a lot of excitement. The crowd was very good around it. I still have to give that match like an A, even though I haven't even really talked about it, which indicates that that's kind of the average of what we would call things before. But then the ending really pulled it down. And I think you could have a bunch of A's and maybe a C here with the tag match. You could line up a whole bunch of A's and then an A plus 5-star level match with Toni Storm and Mariah May. And then if the last match is a D, it's going to drag the whole thing down to a B. So while I have seen a lot of improvement just in the last month or so in the level of product, I think the fact that he didn't end it, this was one of the few times that I just really did not want to see anybody else but Toni Storm and Mariah May in the main event. And they really got the order wrong, and I think it really hurt them. So what did you think of AEW Revolution 2025? What was good? What was bad? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? Please let me know in the comments below. And be sure to check us out every Friday with our main show and our weekly updates. Every Friday, I believe about 6 o'clock, the show drops. Please be sure to check it out. Keep watching, and we'll keep wrestling with the business.